Hello, hi everyone. Today in this class we will see about on debugging SAS macros and data interface function. It's our day 4 macros class. If anyone is watching this class for the first time, I recommend you guys to watch day 1, day 2 and day 3 macro videos if you are new to the macros. Okay, so in the data interface function, first we will see about um, calls input, Simget and so on, and then we will also see about some of the SAS macros debugging options. So far we have seen creating macros by using %let, right? So but today in this data interface functions we will see how to create macro variables by using data step by using calls input function. Okay, let's see about calls input function first. So this calls input function is used to create macro variable from the data step block. Okay, let's create a macro variable by using data step. So here I'm taking data. Let's take test. Okay, and then here I'm taking x equal to x is my variable name, and here I'm taking a value as help dot class. Okay, you can take any value. I just simply took SAS help.class, but we need to keep this value in the quotations. So here I kept these values in the quotations, and now I want to create a macro variable from this one. How can I do that? Means let's use call input function. Okay, call input. So what this input will do? Assigns data step information to a macro variable. Okay, so let's use this call input, and here in the parenthesis in the quotations first specify the macro variable name that you want to assign. Okay, now I want to assign a macro variable name called y, and to this, so this macro name variable, I want this macro variable value to be this value, that means x value. So specify whatever the value that you want to give to this particular macro variable. So here I am specifying x. Okay, so now execute it. See, now it will create a macro variable first. See, now it created a data step and also it created a macro variable. Now let's call this macro with %put. Okay, %put. Why we use this %put? It writes macro variable information to the SAS log. Okay, so let's use %put. %put of ampersand y. Okay, now let's execute this. See, in the log what I got here, what is my y value here? SAS help.class. Okay, instead of SAS help.class, if you want to give just the class, you can give it. Okay, let's execute it. See, I got y value as class now. If you don't want to create an output data as like this, you can use which option? You can use underscore null underscore. We have discussed this in the previous classes, right? Underscore null underscore, what it will do, specifies the SAS does not create a data set when it executes the data step. Okay, so it won't create a data set. Now let's do it. See, let's execute this now. Now it won't create a data set. See, it won't create a data set now, but it created a macro here, and I have called my macro. My value is class here. Okay, like this we can create macro variables from the data step block. Okay, so what is the next one? The next one is SimGet. Okay, by using this SimGet function we'll be able to create dataset variables from macro variable. Okay, so here I have created a macro variable called y. Okay, so from this macro variable value I want to created data set variable. Data set variable is nothing but this, right? So let's take an example for that. See, for example, here I want to create a data set called data test1. Okay, I want to create a data set called data test1. But what is the value that I want to create here? Data set variable value, this macro value I want to be created here as a dataset variable value. For that, what we will do is, so let's first give the variable name. Variable name I want to give as xy. Okay, so this is my xy is my variable name. In this xy variable, what is the value that I want? This macro variable value. So xy equal to simget. We use here simget function. Simget of, okay, in the parenthesis, which variable value that we want, which macro variable value, this y value, right? So give here y. Okay, now execute this. Now what it will do is, it will create a data set test1 with a variable called xy, and it will get the value from this macro variable y by using this simget function. So now I will get xy value as class. Let's check it. Let's execute this first. See, now it created a variable called xy, and its data value as class. Okay, like this we can create a data set variable from a macro variable. Okay, what is the next one? See, SimExist. What this SimExist will do? Returns values for macro, whether it is existing or not. Okay, so here we have seen SimGet, right? So what this SimGet will do is, by default the variable created by SimGet will have 200 length. Let's check it. So here it created a variable, right? So xy variable, let's check the length. See, what is the length it assigned? By default it assigned 200 length. So whenever we create a variable from the macro variable by using this simget function, it will get a variable length by default 200. Okay, so the next one is, what is the next one? SimExist. By using SimExist, we can check whether the particular macro variable is present in the system or not. See, now I have created a macro called y, right, by using data step black. Now I want to check whether it is present in the system or not. So what we know is actually it present, right? I just created it, but let's check it. Okay, so now let's take data underscore null underscore, because I don't want to create a data set. If I'm giving a condition here, if sim exist, okay, of sim exist of, let's give which way macro variable y. I'm checking for macro variable y. If it is present, then I want to print 1 in my log. Then I want to put yes. Okay, so basically, if y macro variable is present then I want to put yes. Okay, if it is not present, then I want to put else, put n in the log window. Okay, let's check it. Run, execute this. See, now it, see what is the value that I got here? Yes, that means y is present. See, for example, let's check for some macro variable z. Okay, I didn't created it, but I want to check it whether it is present in my SAS or not. Okay, let's execute this. Now let's see what it will put. When I give an X, it printed yes, right? Now I am giving Z, basically it should print N because it is not present, right? Let's check it. See, now it printed N. That means it is not present in my SAS because I didn't create it. Okay. So like this, we can check whether particular macro variable is present in the system or not. Okay. What is the next one? So let's check for SimGlobal. What is SimGlobal? It returns a value of 1 if the macro variable is found in the global symbol table. That means we can check whether the macro variable is global macro variable or not. Okay. See, now let's check. Let's take the same example. So by using SimGlobal, we'll be able to check whether the macro variable that we have is a global macro variable or not. Okay, so now here I'm taking the same macro variable, which is y, and then now I want to, instead of sim exist, now I want to do sim global. Okay, if it is a sim global is global. Okay, SimGlobal, what it will do, returns an indicator of whether a macro variable is in the global scope to the data step during data step execution. Okay, let's execute this. If it is global macro variable, then it will give S. If not, then it will give Y. Let's check it whether it's a global or not. Yes, the macro variable Y that we have created, it's a global macro variable because it gave us Y. Yes. Okay. So the next, what is the next one after global sim global? The next one is call SimDel. That means we'll be able to delete the macro variable. Okay, by using this call SimDel function, we'll be able to delete the macro variable that we have already created in our system. See, now by using this, I want to delete this y variable, data underscore null underscore I want to use because I don't want to create a data set here. Okay, now call SimDel. I want to delete the macro variable, right? So in the parenthesis, give whatever the macro variable value that you want to delete. See, now here I am giving y, okay, because I want to delete the macro variable y. Now run. Let's check. See, now I have executed this one, right? Now let's check whether it is present or not. See, earlier when I executed this sim exister, it printed yes, right? Now I have used a SimDel to delete this macro variable. Now check again with this SimExist function whether this macro variable is present or not. Here you can see the log. Okay, so let's execute this and now check after using this SimDel whether it is present or not. See, now my answer is no because we have deleted the oh sorry, here it is Z. I don't want the Z, I want to use Y. Okay, now execute this. Okay, for Y macro also my answer is N because I have deleted that macro variable by using this SimDel, called SimDel function. Okay, what is the next one? CallExecute. Okay, by using CallExecute function, we'll be able to execute the macro from data step block. Okay, that is nothing but we will be able to call the macro from the data step block. See, first let's create a macro. How we create a macro? Percent macro. Let's give a name for this macro. Print. Okay, I'm giving here x equal to, so here I'm giving proc print data equal to let's call this macro here %x, okay, and run. End the macro with %ment. And now here call the macro. How can we call the macro in the normal method? We use %print, right, to call the macro. So here I am calling the macro by using %print and x equal to let's give SAS help dot class. So this is how we normally call the macro, right? But see, first let's create a macro and call it. Okay, see, let's check the log. Now I have created a macro. Okay, let's call the macro by using %print. Let's check the log. Okay, now instead of calling the macro by using this method %print like this, I want to call the macro from the data step block. Okay, that is another way to call the macro from the data step block by using the CallExecute function. So let's do it. Data. I don't want to create a data set. Let's give underscore null underscore, and here give CallExecute. Okay, CallExecute in the parenthesis give in the quotations same thing %print. Whatever we give here to call the macro gives the same thing in the data step like this. Now execute the function. See, now it will call the macro by using the data step block same as like this. See, I have called the macro and it created a data set. Okay, what it is showing here, CallExecute generator line. Okay, so now it called the macro. So this is basically another way of calling the macro. Let's check the log. Okay, so like this also we can call the macro from the data step block by using CallExecute function. See, now for example I want to see when I execute this macro, by default where it will get stored, if I didn't specify anything, by default it will get stored into my work library, right? See, everything will get stored into my work library, but I want to store my macro into the for example SAS user library. How can I do that? Okay, for that let's see about how to call the macros, like auto calling the macros. So what is that? The next thing in this class is auto call the macros. So by using this auto call macros, we'll be able to save the macro code and we'll be able to call them for multiple seasons. That means after even ending the session, whenever you require that particular macro, you will be able to call that macro. When once you created that macro, you will be able to call that macro whenever you wanted. Okay, for that, to save the macro catalog instead of macro application and call for multiple seasons, we have three things. What are those three things? SAS mstore, SAS mstore and SAS autos. Okay, what this SAS mstore will do? Global option and specifies the name of the library for the storage, and mstore what it will do is global option and store the catalog in required library. Let's see all this with an example. Okay, it will be clear. See, now here for this macro only I want to save this macro in the SAS user library. How can I do that? For that, take options statement. In the options statement, let's specify SAS mstore. Okay, why we use SAS mstore? SAS mstore is used to store the macro in the particular library. So in which library I want to store this? So specify that macro library name here in the SAS M store. So here I'm giving SAS user. Okay, in the SAS user library I want to store this macro. So after SAS M store and SAS user option, specify M stored option. Okay, by using M stored option only you are confirming to store in that particular library. If you don't specify that, it will not get stored. Okay, so let's confirm that with M stored option. Okay, then next to, while creating the macro, next to the our macro variable name with a slash, specify store source. Okay, what this store source will do is, without this store source, without this it didn't store the specified macro variable in the given library, because by if I didn't specify this store source, it won't store this macro into the SAS user library, because by default it will store in the work library. So for that reason, to avoid storing it into the work library, we use this store source option. Okay, now let's execute this one first, and now create a macro, and while call okay, here what it is showing, the SAS system was unable to open the macro library references by the SAS M store. Write access to member SAS user dot SAS macro catalog is denied. Okay, so we won't be able to do this in the SAS academics version. So let's try the same thing in the 9.2 version. Okay, so here what I am doing is, basically we don't have access to write anything to our SAS user library in the academics version, so I'm trying to show that from the different version. Okay, so here what I am doing is, I'm copying the same no. Let's copy the same program. Okay, okay, now what I will do is, I want to store this macro in the SAS user library here. I'll be able to do that here. Okay, create a macro now. Let's check the log. Okay, there is nothing over here. Okay, now see where it got stored. It got stored in my SAS user library. Let's check it. Let's go to work library first. In the work library, in the SAS macros, I have PNT and PNT1 which I have created earlier, but now the macro variable that I have created is print, right? I don't have that in my work library. Okay, let's check it in the SAS user library. See, this is the SAS user library. Let's check it here. Okay, SAS macros. See, here I have print macro variable got stored in the form of catalog file. Now while calling the macro, we use an option called options. Okay, and here while calling the macro that is already stored in the system or in the SAS, we call it by using the SAS autos option. Okay, SAS autos equal to, in which library it got stored, SAS user library, right? Give it here, and now I want to call the macro by using this data step function. See, here I have taken call execute and everything. So first execute this option before calling. Okay, now it will print this one. See, now I am calling this print macro variable. See, Now I have called this macro variable which I have stored in the SAS user library. Okay, like this we can store our macro variables permanently in our libraries by using this SAS mstore, store source and SAS autos options. Okay, this is called as the auto calling macros. By using this store catalogs we can store our macros permanently into our libraries. Okay, the next concept is debugging SAS macros. Okay, we have some debugging options in this SAS macros. We will see one by one. Okay, first let's see about error. What this error will do, displays warning message in log window whenever macro call is not resolved. Okay, so the default option is error. Okay, so let's move to this. Okay, see here in this SAS session I have created print macro and I have created x variable and y, but I never created a macro variable called print1, right? So but I want to call this macro print1 which I haven't created. See, now if I execute this, what happens? I am getting a warning message called apparent invocation of macro print1 not resolved. That means there is no print1 macro created by me. Okay, so the default option is options error is the default option. Okay, so that's why it is showing that warning message. Okay, here we are seeing this warning message, right? That one is shown to us by the default option called error option. Okay, see, for example, now I don't want to display this warning message. Okay, so for that here I am using no error. Okay, let's execute this. Okay, and now execute this %print1. Now it will not show you that error. See, here it is not showing that warning message, right? Okay, like this, if we don't want to display warning message in log window whenever macro call is not resolved, in that case we use this no error message. Okay, see, for example, if you don't want to display warning message in log window while you call the macro variable which is not resolved, here we call the macro, right? But if you want to call the macro variable, okay, which you haven't created, see, for example, here in this session I didn't create a macro variable called abc, right? Here I have created macro variable called x, y, u, z, all these macro variables, but I never created a macro variable called abc. Now I want to call the macro variable, okay, which I haven't created. Okay, how can I do that? Let's give %put, okay, %put, let's take a macro variable ampersand abc. Okay, now if I execute this, what happens? See, let me use this default option. Instead of no error, I'm removing this no error to error, so that will be default. Okay, now I'm calling this macro variable abc. Here I have called the macro, but here I'm calling the macro variable abc. What is the error it is showing? Warning message, apparent symbolic reference abc not resolved. Now I don't want to see this warning message here. Okay, for that we use an option called no yes error. No yes error means what it will do? Issues no warning messages when the macro processor cannot match a macro variable. Okay, so let's execute this one first. Okay, Now call this macro variable ABC. Now you won't see any warning message here. See, I don't see any warning message, right? So like this, we can remove warning messages by using this MError and SError. But no MError is used for while calling the macro which is not resolved. This SError is used while calling the macro variable which is not resolved. Okay. So the next one is, what is the next one? Imprint. Okay, this Imprint, what it will do is translates the macro language to the regular SAS language. That means it displays all the SAS statements of the resolved macro code. See, here I am taking an example. Okay, so if you don't know how to solve this macro or how I have created this macro, refer to my day 3 class. There I have explained about this macro and macro calling. Okay, so now let's create a macro first. Okay, now I'm calling this macro test. You can use this Imprint on anything, but I just simply took this example because by using this I will be able to trace out the macro catalog. Okay, see here, now I want to trace the macro catalog for this macro. See, without Imprint option, how my log is looking like? It is like this, right? Now I am using an option called let's use options Imprint. Okay, what this Imprint will do is it will displace the SAS statements that are generated by the macro execution. Okay, so here whatever the SAS statements that are generated while executing this macro, that will be displayed in the log window. Okay, now I am using this. See, without Imprint, my log is looking like this. Okay, now if I use the Imprint option, now let's see my log. Let's check my log. Okay, now let's execute this macro. Now let's check the log. See, now what it is doing, it is tracing out the macro catalog. What is the macro catalog? Test is my macro, right? It is tracing out the macro and displaying the execution of SAS code in the log window. Okay, at each step what this test is resolving to, that will be showing in my log window. See here in the first step what it has been resolved to, proc print data equal to SAS help dot class, then it is resolved to SAS help dot course. Okay, then it is resolved to aid. So every time it is showing what what my macro variable or the macro catalog has been resolved to. Okay, so to know that we use this Imprint option. Okay, we have another option called symbol gen. Okay, what this symbol gen will do is it writes the results of resolving macro variable. Here it is showing resolved macro program in the log window, right? See, it is showing only for the macro resolving. See, what it is basically showing, tracing out the macro catalog. This is the macro that I have created and displaying the execution SAS code, what it has been executed to. But now by using symbol gen option, we will be able to trace out macro variables. Okay, what are the macro variables here? I is the macro variable, right? dset is a macro variable, dname is also a macro variable. Now if I use this symbol gen option, now it will it will displays messages in the log window what the macro variables has been resolved to. Okay, now let's use symbol gen option. Symbol gen option, what it is showing here, displays the results of resolving macro variable references. Okay, this option is useful for debugging. Okay, let's use symbol gen. Now let's execute this one first, and now execute this. Now it will show in the log whatever the macro variables that has been resolved to. See here it is showing symbol gen. Now here what it is showing, macro variable I, okay, resolved to 1, and macro variable d name which is resolved to SAS help.class cors and a, and then again what it is showing, macro variable I resolves to 1. Okay, like that everywhere it will show whatever the macro variables that it has been resolved to. Okay, so by using MPrint what we have done, it shows messages macros resolves to the code SAS code, and here it is showing the messages for macro variables, and MPrint will shows the messages for the macro. Okay, so let's see the difference between what is this difference between this MPrint and the symbol gen. So we'll be able to see the log generated by these two options. Yes, we have seen that. And what we'll be able to see, MPrint option prints all the statements. By using MPrint we have printed all the statements, right? See, MPrint is printing all the statements that it has been resolved to, and then all the statements within the macro, not just macro variables. Whereas symbol gen option prints only the results of macro variables. Now it's clear, right? MPrint what it will do? Prints option MPrint option prints all the statements within the macro but not the macro variables. Whereas symbol gen option what it will do? Prints only the results of macro variables. Okay. So these are the some of the SAS macro debugging options. Okay. Thank you all. In the next class, we will see about um, creating macro variables using proc SQL, and also we will see about calling macro using multiple ampersand signs. Okay. Thank you all. Bye bye.